In the Zohar, it says that we have 2 arms, 2 legs, and 1 head, and we're like a hand. I had a talk with a friend where we were saying, how do we know if it's a demon, a shadow, lurking in the shadow inside of us? So it wants power, it wants control over someone, it wants credit from people, or it needs external validation for being helpful, useful, when it's not provided or not possible, versus getting from, like who's always watching, which is Hashem, like God is always watching, and God could validate us. We'll see signs that what we're doing is good. In Shabbat 88b, it says, those who are insulted and do not insult, who hear their shame and do not respond, who act out of love and are joyful in suffering. The verse, Shoftim, Judges 5:31, says, they that love him are as the sun going forth in its might. I had a talk with Betzalel about self-knowledge, how it's power, because first of all, when we explore our values, whether it's kindness, grace, wealth, looks, athletics, image, or status, we start to learn about ourselves, like what we value, what we're willing to go after, what we look at in others. Number 2, we see availability, whether it's time, emotionally, our time availability, our mental availability, our emotional availability, physical availability. And this is something that's not static, it changes. We learn about ourselves. Sometimes we're more available, less available, sometimes more emotionally available, some less emotionally available, some physically more available, some less physically available. We can gauge capacity, whether our plate is full, if there's space, whether our battery has enough juice and energy. This is also something that's not static, and it changes. In the Zohar, it says, by his injuries, chaveruto in Hebrew, we are healed. Yeshayahu 53:5. Namely, with a connection, which is very similar to the word for injuries and chibur, chaveruto, with a connection he made with us in exile, we're healed. Which is like Hashem, right? For you are like the shining sun, since though the sun sets at night, this is from the Zohar, since the sun sets at night, it shines on the moon and all the stars and constellations, so do you shine upon all the sages of all kinds of halacha and Kabbalah who are watered in secret from you like a spring that waters the trees under the root, unbeknownst, until its water breaks into the open. This is what is meant by, so will your spring be dispersed abroad. Mishlei 5:16. I went to a workshop for dealing with the shadow. We're talking about the shadow and maybe like we'll say exile or self-knowledge and the insults, all of this related to the shadow. And so he was telling us, find your virtues and then find their opposites. So the virtue of shy, modest, I saw as loud, boisterous, aggressive. Then I saw the virtue of, the opposite is loud, boisterous, aggressive. And I saw the virtue that I see in myself, honest, sincere, earnest. I saw the virtue as duplicitous, conniving, manipulative. Then the virtue of faith, willing, and courage, I saw the opposite as doubtful, suspicious, fault-finding. Then I saw the virtue of caring, helpful, compassionate. The virtue is stingy, numb, indifferent. I spoke to David Sandek, this man, Yehuda David Daniel sandek, and he said, he told me you have ancient, useful, youthful, innocent wisdom, and I thanked him for his recognition, which is hod, his acknowledgement, appreciation, and appraisal. I want to share from the Zohar also. It says there were 4 exiles, 3 corresponding to the 3 nutshells. 1 without form, which is tohu, which is a green line, the green shell of the nut. Then you have void, which is bohu, and that's with it, which is viscous stones, which are strong boulders from which the Mishnah sages legislated some decrees, and they hold on to them, since water will come out of them. The 3rd klipa is the thick shell of the nut, which is the 3rd exile that was short. This is darkness. 4 is the 4th exile, which is a great abyss, which is the space inside the nut, as it says in bereishis, Genesis 1:2. Darkness was on the face of the deep. I want to share from Self-Care Warrior on Instagram. Self, SELF-CARE, Warrior, WARRIOR. When survival strategies become long-term and maladaptive. So short-term survival versus long-term maladaptive. The short-term survival of fight mode is fighting back against a perpetrator or threat to survive. The long-term maladaptive is when it's defensive anger, hypervigilance, irritability, continuously scanning environment to fight off potential threats, reacting to non-threatening stimuli as if it's a threat. The body braces itself and is constantly tense, as if constantly tense from stress hormones not yet expended. and is a preemptive, ready to fight back kind of energy. What about flight mode? The short-term survival would be fleeing from threat. The long-term maladaptive is avoiding relationships, social isolation, inability to handle conflict, escapism through excessive use of substances, disordered eating, sexual practices, self-harm, reckless behavior, over-exercising. Freeze is short-term survival, is freezing in the face of a threat to avoid being further targeted by a predator. It's called tonic immobility during an assault sometimes. The long-term maladaptive is dissociation from the present-day reality, including binging on food, TV, internet, substances, emotional numbness, staying silent and feeling silence when conflict arises, hiding one's true self or assets, and not pursuing goals to avoid being a target, and not pursuing and diminishing oneself in the hopes that you're not noticed by envious or exploitative people. What about fawning? We have the short-term survival is placating a caregiver or person in power to get basic needs met. Long-term maladaptive is people-pleasing, issues with setting boundaries, staying in toxic relationships, taking a caregiver role in relationships, creating a false self to appease others, being inauthentic due to fear of abandonment, and attempting to soothe abusers and manipulators in an attempt to avoid being harmed. I want to share from Shwartz and Gay in 1994. These are functions of addictive behavior. They said, for example, sexual. Comfort, nurturance, numbing, distraction, sedation. It's an energizer. It's a cry for help or attention. It's rebellion. It's discharge anger. It's identity, self-esteem. It's maintaining helplessness. It's control and power. It's predictability and structure. It's establishment of psychological space. It's reenactment of abuse. It's repetition compulsion. It's self-punishment or punishing the body. It's containment or fragmentation. It's dissociation from intrusive thoughts and feelings and images. It's cleansing or purifying the self. It's avoidance of intimacy. It's releasing tension built from hypervigilance. Symptoms prove I am bad instead of blaming abusers. I want to read it again. Comfort, nurture, numbing, distraction, sedation, energizer, attention or cry for help, rebellion, to discharge anger, identity and self-esteem, to maintain helplessness, control and power, predictability and structure, establishment of psychological space, reenactment of abuse, which is called repetition compulsion, self-punishment or punishing the body, containment or fragmentation, dissociation from intrusive thoughts, feelings, and images, cleanse or purify the self, avoidance of intimacy, release tension built from hypervigilance. Symptoms prove I'm bad instead of blaming abusers. The last thing I'll share today is that the lubavitcher on the Tanya by the Rebbe said the liquid that's forced out through the cracks of an absolutely full barrel is no more than a trickle. Yet what forces it through is the fullness of the entire quantity of the wine within the barrel. Likewise, pressing out the soul refers to a state in which the entire essence of the soul is bursting forth with its love for God. Yet only a trickle of this love is visible externally. That's all for today. Actually, this is a video for the other day. I'm recording it today.